Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Marty Supreme, and in the second half, I'm going to review the movie Primate. So, starting off with Marty Supreme, I love the Safdie brothers. I think both Good Time and Uncut Gems are awesome movies that are super intense and keep you on the edge of your seat. And it surprised me to hear that the brothers chose to go their separate ways and make their own movies after Uncut Gems. So in 2025, we actually got two movies by two different Safdies. Brother Benny Safdie made The Smashing Machine starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It was an okay movie, I thought. The Rock actually did a good job, and so did Emily Blunt, but I thought it was kind of like unfocused and not nearly as interesting as it could have been. It was well shot though, and still had certain things you'd expect from a Safdie movie. But it was different though than what the brothers did with their other movies, which were typically more intense, a bit more, exciting. The Smashing Machine was much more of a drama. But then comes Marty Supreme, directed by other brother, Josh Safdie. And what did he do? He basically made another movie like Good Time and Uncut Gems. And I've seen some people point this out, but it is kind of funny, that one brother tried to do something completely different, only to get mixed results. And then the other brother makes the same movie a third time, and it's probably the best of all three. And I don't want to be too harsh on The Smashing Machine, but I just found that Marty Supreme was overall more well-written, more well-directed, edited, has better sound mixing, better music, a stronger story, more interesting characters, and a clearer theme. I mean, I can go on and on. It's just, I think Marty Supreme is just a much stronger film on a lot of levels. And maybe it's because this was a loosely based story, so it didn't have, I guess, as much responsibility as The Smashing Machine to be true to life. And, something The Smashing Machine does is, it's kind of based on, I guess, a documentary, you could say. So it's trying to kind of recreate the documentary a little bit. And that's, not the first time a movie's done that this year, interestingly enough. But I think Marty Supreme being a bit more loose with its story allows much more creative freedom. And not to mention how good Timothée Chalamet is in this movie. I mean, he kills it. Any doubters of him should be changed by the end of this movie. If you watched Wonka, you watched Dune, you watched Call Me By Your Name, you still weren't sold on Timothée Chalamet as an actor, go watch this movie. You will be blown away by him. And, the same way if you doubted Adam Sandler before Uncut Gems or doubted Robert Pattinson before Good Time, you will definitely see what I'm talking about. And maybe that's the Safdie brothers' secret weapon, just getting fantastic performances out of overlooked actors. And I think the big challenge Marty Supreme had as a movie is making this terrible, awful guy someone you want to follow. And the movie succeeds, actually. It succeeds very well. I thought Marty was super interesting to watch, in part thanks to Chalamet's performance. And it's just the fact that, he's such a terrible human being. Someone who in a lot of other movies, you'd be like, this is the villain of the movie. I don't want this guy to win. He's such a jerk, and he's such a piece of garbage. And, just Timothée Chalamet finds his way to make him both kind of, interesting, but also, you want to see what's going to happen with him. You're very interested and invested in what's going to happen with him. So Timothée Chalamet really knocked it out of the park there, and people are saying he could even win Best Actor at the Oscars this year, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, but to be honest, my pick right now would still be Leonardo DiCaprio from One Battle After Another. Just personal preference, I think that's the better performance, but doesn't take anything away from how good Timothée Chalamet is here. And everyone else in the supporting cast does a good job. There are some fun cameos and kind of fun casting choices made here, like Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, playing a big supporting role. He basically plays himself, which is just a billionaire, but he does a good job at it. He has a lot of fun in this movie. He has a few scenes that are actually very funny, too. And I'll say similar to Avatar, Fire and Ash, I think this movie borders on being a bit too long, but also similar to that movie, it did keep me engaged throughout. I did feel the runtime, but I also was never flat out bored by it, or, thought it really just, was wearing me out. It was just okay, this movie's going on a little bit long. Wasn't really affecting how much I enjoyed it, though. I think this is a very intense and thrilling film. So much craziness happens on screen, and I could feel my heart rate spiking constantly. It was really good in that way. The ping pong scenes in particular are just so good. I could watch those all day long. The movie also has a very sharp sense of humor, making some of the intense situations have a bit of levity to it, and also being self-aware enough that the film doesn't feel monotone. And similar to other Safdie movies, it just kind of has this signature trademarks, like the constant yelling and talking over each other, which only adds to the intensity. Like, you just have so many scenes where characters are just, like, having conversations and other people are having conversations, like, right next to them. And, in other movies, it'd be, like, background noise. In this movie, it's, like, it's all, up to a 10. Here's the thing. I mean, Marty Supreme won't be for everyone. Like, I think a lot of people will really like it, but it's a vibe for sure. And I think it's a really good film that has excellent performances and some top-notch writing and direction. I'm sure it'll be up for a lot of awards. Just my one other note with this movie is I didn't find all the drama in Marty's life to be quite as interesting to me as the ping pong stuff. Like, the ping pong stuff was amazing. Every time we went to that, I was just so locked in, and I loved it. The drama was good. It was definitely good, but maybe just not quite as strong as the ping pong stuff to me. And that's kind of how I felt about Smashing Machine a little bit too, maybe just to a more extreme extent, where, I was interested in the wrestling stuff in Smashing Machine, but, the drama just wasn't very well done. In this case, it's much better, just personal preference on what I liked more. And as I kind of said, this movie will undoubtedly be up for a lot of award nominations this year, and we'll see how many it takes away. But I'll say this much. It absolutely deserves to be in the conversation, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. So I'm going to give Marty Supreme a B+. Alright, and next up is Primate. It feels like every year we have to have a big movie about a monkey or ape come out. I don't know why that's the trend these days in Hollywood. I guess people just really like those animals. 2024 had a crazy amount. I mean, we had like Better Man, Monkey Man, Godzilla X Kong, Planet of the Apes. Like, I think there was even maybe one or two more, but it's just crazy. And now as the first major release in 2026, we have Primate, this horror movie about a pet chimp who gets rabies and brutally kills a bunch of people. If that sounds like your kind of movie, stay tuned. If not, you can just leave and go somewhere else. But I'm going to be completely honest here. I thought the trailers for this movie just did no favors whatsoever. It looked cheap. It didn't look scary. It just seemed like an ultra bad January horror movie. And for those who don't already know, January is usually the dumping ground for bad horror movies. But the interesting thing here is that some people had already watched the movie prior to that trailer being released at some film festivals, and it had good reviews. And it was like, I think when I saw this movie, it had like 92%. It's dropped a bit considerably since then. Still very fresh, though. And I was wondering, though, if like maybe it was just a bad trailer. I mean, I'm not kidding. The trailer for this movie it's so bad. Like, I saw it in theaters, a few times, and every time, like, the audience just laughed during the trailer and afterwards went like, what the heck is that? Like, that looks terrible. And so really just terrible marketing from Paramount on this movie. I mean, I think they've turned away so many people who might have watched it otherwise. We'll see if reviews and word of mouth can kind of save it, but, spoiler alert, I'm not going to be giving this movie good word of mouth. So, anywho, though, I'm here to give my 2 cents on the film, and here's what I'll say. No, this movie isn't as bad as the trailer, but yes, it's a bad movie. And for the first third or so, I was thinking it was a decent amount better than I expected. But then I slowly began to realize that a lot of the decisions being made in this movie just weren't working for me. And it only got worse from there. Like, for one, you have this movie about a pet chimp that's a part of this family, like losing himself and becoming, like, crazy. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, why doesn't the movie get you to care about the chimp before he loses it? Why don't we get to spend time, seeing the chimp at his prime and his happiest before tragedy strikes and, he becomes something else? I even think back to the movie Rampage, which had The Rock and, like, a giant, I think, a giant, like, gorilla of some kind. And in that movie, it was just, the gorilla became, like, mad and much more aggressive. And I'm not saying it was a good movie, but you at least saw the relationship between, the Rock and the gorilla, and you felt when the gorilla was like becoming more angry, you're like, oh, I don't want to see the gorilla like hurt people. This movie doesn't really get that though. Primate doesn't do that. It starts off, and I'm really like trying to be very, light on details here, but you just don't get time to really get invested in Ben the chimp or the humans even. And it's just small things like this that, one, make the movie less effective. Like, if we felt for Ben the chimp and seeing this awful thing happen to a loved one, it would hit a lot harder. But also, number two, it would be scarier. Watching a rabid ape kill people is kind of gruesome, but what makes it truly scary is caring about the people it's happening to, or caring about the ape who is doing it. And this film doesn't really find that tonal balance it needs to have, because if you're going to skip past the tragedy part, you just have to make the movie bloody crazy and entertaining and exciting enough that you can get past it, that you can think, okay, I'm a little upset we didn't get this like really great tragedy, but at least it's fun enough that I'm having a good time, I'm not really thinking about it. It's just, Primate takes itself way too seriously for that, only offering a few moments of genuine humor, one of which is including a TV and, certain swiper. So it just kind of finds this awkward middle ground where you're not having fun and you're not emotionally hooked either. And as I said, we don't care about any of the characters, not really. The movie tries to set up this thing with two sisters and their dad, which could have worked, but it's so rushed and barely makes an impact. And the two sisters could have been effective, like, if we had more of a focus on them. But the movie makes a choice where you don't get to see a lot of them interacting together for a while. And I noticed it while watching the movie. I was like, that's a big missed opportunity to really, like, have the two sisters thing really matter to the story. And another thing, which I admit may be a hot take, and this may be, like, the most controversial thing I say in this review, is that I didn't like the score. To be fair, the score itself is fine. It actually sounds good, out of context, and is kind of reminiscent of what John Carpenter did with Halloween. And it kind of led me to believe this movie wants to be a slasher with a chimp as the lead. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but hear me out. It actually is a pretty interesting idea. Like, it's a creature feature, but, it's almost treated like a slasher, where it's just this chimp just going around, like, killing people. It's kind of like an interesting idea. But anyway, going back to the score, I think in the context of the movie, I just don't think that vibe works. That, slasher, John Carpenter, Halloween vibe. I don't think it really works. And there are these, like, abstract instrumentals during dialogue scenes, which took me out of the film. It just didn't match. And then during the horror, it was also kind of distracting. Maybe it could have worked if the movie just, like, totally committed more to an old school slasher movie vibe. And the writing and the tropes are definitely reminiscent of one at times. It's just the way that the movie looks and is shot screams a 2026 horror movie. I don't know, it kind of has that Blumhouse look to it, if you know what I mean, if you've ever seen a Blumhouse movie. I don't know, if you made it like shot on film kind of look, made it look a little more grainy, maybe even took place in like the 80s or 90s, it could have worked. I don't know, it didn't totally work for me as it was. But to be fair, I do want to give this movie its flowers where it deserves them. One thing is that this movie does a good job with the gore and prosthetics. Like, the movie doesn't cut away a lot of the time, and it's pretty disturbing when you have these kills. Like, there's a few, the opening scene itself, like, really leaves an impression of, like, wow, this movie's gonna be very brutal to watch, and you will know immediately whether or not you can handle it. So the deaths are definitely the best part of this movie, and I think that's something basically everyone can agree on. And the other thing I liked here is that there are a couple directional cinematography choices I liked. One being that a character is pretty drunk at one point, and as we're following her walking to a bedroom, the camera is much more handheld and tipsy along with her, and that was nice. Like, that was actually a touch I really noticed, and, I just think it stood out to me as kind of like, oh, that's a very intentional choice they did there, and I don't know, that was early on in the movie. It got me kind of almost excited of, like, what they were going to do later. I didn't think that the camera, shot choices were nearly as strong in the back half of the film. But there were moments occasionally like that where I was just like, huh, like this actually kind of has some flavor to it. Like as a horror movie, this actually kind of has a style. But as it went, it really just kind of abandoned that and became more generic. But yeah, I really didn't like Primate. If you love slasher movies, you'll probably enjoy it way more than me. Personally, I've never cared for slashers. Like, I think even Halloween is a very overrated movie. I know that's a very hot take, but that's just where I come from. And in the case of this film, it's just the characters are so dumb and make these terrible choices, and the horror, feels very contrived and forced, and it's kind of boring too. Not to mention that lack of an emotional connection I talked about earlier. So when you have all of that put together, you kind of get this movie that just feels very underwhelming and just kept distracting me, taking me out of the movie because I'm just nitpicking the whole time of like, why would you do that as a character? Like, why would you make that decision? That's the worst thing you could possibly do. And this movie is literally just filled with every kind of bad decision in a horror movie that I just can't stand. Like every bad trope this movie does, and it was frustrating me a lot. Again, if you like slashers, you probably don't care that much about the tropes. Like you don't mind that characters make terrible choices. For me, that's kind of why I like the elevated horror. I find that it does less of that. This movie just feels more like a return to all those bad decisions I don't like. And I don't know, your mileage will vary with this one. It seems like I'm in the minority, so take everything that I said with a grain of salt if you do like slashers. And if you're interested in checking it out, go ahead. Otherwise, I would say probably just wait until Paramount Plus, or maybe just skip it. Go watch Avatar, go watch Marty Supreme. Anaconda wasn't very good, but it's better than this. And, yeah, that's, I don't want to beat this movie up too much. Whether it's for you or not. I'm going to rate it a D+. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.